Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Hamre. I'm the president here at CSIS, and we have a remarkable opportunity today, and that is to have a conversation with the foreign minister of Spain. This is Minister Alvarez. He's a remarkable leader, and it's a very important time to have a very senior leader from Europe with us at a time that there are so many questions about what's going on in Europe, about Ukraine, about NATO, etc. We're going to have a good conversation today. I'm very pleased for this opportunity. Most of our audience is virtual. We do have some people in the room with us, and I welcome all of you today, and I'm delighted to have you with us. Just very briefly, Minister Alvarez is a deeply talented man who comes from the Foreign Service. And because of my numerous conversations with Ambassador Cabenas, I now understand how hard it is to become a diplomat in Spain. You have to really be good to become a diplomat in Spain. And but he's got wider interests than that. He's a lawyer by training and has been a civil servant. He's responsible, very large portfolio, which is also not only for the Foreign Service for Spain, but also relations with the EU, relations with NATO. This is a man who sees the landscape, and we're going to explore all of that today. But before we begin, before we begin the question and answer period, it's my privilege to introduce the Foreign Minister and have him offer his remarks to set the stage for our meeting today. Thank you. Minister Alvarez, please join me.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your words. I'm very honored to be here today in this very prestigious think tank. I pay great importance in my everyday job as a minister, having this dialogue with civil society. And I'm very honored also that you are personally hosting me here today, especially in this complicated time of COVID-19, in which contacts are much more difficult. I'm here to strengthen even more the relationship between United States and Spain. These are relations that are historical, very close, with very strong political ties that take us back to our common presence in NATO, based also in very close security and defense ties, and that have been expanding over the year through the economy, numerous Spanish companies here in the United States and American companies in Spain, cultural, the number of Spanish students in American university has doubled in the last 10 years, and there is around 30,000 American students in Spanish universities. But beyond that, foreign policy, global affairs, it's something that is common to both of our countries. We are together in the fight against COVID-19 and promoting global health. We are together fighting against climate change and in favor of biodiversity. We are together making an energy transition. We are together promoting a gender and diversity agenda. And above all, we are together, especially in these days of great tension in Ukraine, promoting democracy. Very recently, President Biden conveyed President Sanchez to participate in the Summit of Democracy. We were there together with all the other democracies in the world. Because above all, Spain and the United States, we belong to the same community, the community of those countries that believe and foster democracy, the rule of law. At the end, that's what NATO is really about, democracy, rule of law, stable rules in the world. That's why we are having this dialogue within European Union about what should be the presence of European Union in the world and what capacities we should have in order to meet those challenges. And when we have done that, we must have a very high-level dialogue with our natural ally, United States. United States is the natural ally of Spain and the natural ally of Europe. There are, of course, many other areas in which we come together. The interest and the care for Latin America, a common vision on the Sahel and the challenges that the Sahel poses. So I'm eager to have a conversation with you all through this hour in order to exchange views from both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Foreign Minister. Foreign Minister, thank you. It's such a privilege, and I've got so many questions that I want to explore with you. And we're also inviting questions from the audience, and I will receive those from my very able colleague, Donatien, here in a few minutes. But I'd like to start, and just to let people know where I'd like to take the conversation. First, we have to talk about Ukraine. I mean, I think because of your visit. I know that you met yesterday with Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, and with Nancy Pelosi. I'm sure that, I know this was a major topic of your conversation. To the extent that you can share with us, where do you think this goes? What does it mean for NATO at this stage?
Yesterday, as you say, I met with my good friend Tony Blinken. I met also with Nancy Pelosi. Of course, Ukraine was in our conversation. Nothing more normal between two strong and close allies. What is at stake right now? It's two things. It's whether we move forward towards the future, a future of a world based on rules that are stable, a peaceful world, or we want to go back to the times of a sphere of influence, of military tensions. Definitely, Spain and the United States, we want to move forward and look toward the future. And the second thing is each country must have the right to decide its own scheme of security. Every organization must be able to decide who are their own members, whether it's NATO or the European Union or any other organization. So we want to go on that direction, or once again, we want to go back to the time of spheres of influence in which one country dictates what another country can do or cannot do. So what is at stake? It's very important because it's what type of world we want to live in. This crisis, this tension, in which the whole world is looking, we all hold a little bit our breath, shows where the real allies are. And what's very positive about all this is that within European Union and within NATO, all partners, all allies, we have even more close than before. How we perceive this? We want to give a chance to the dialogue. We think that that's the way international relation, the relation between states, the relation between NATO and Russia should go. So there are positive signs. The Council, Russia, NATO, haven't met for 2 years. Mm-hmm. There are meetings, right, in these last few days. That's very positive. And at the same time, if things don't go the way we want, through dialogue, where we are all united, all the allies, we will remain united also in deterrence. We don't want that way. We want the dialogue, but we need two to tango.
Mm. You know, it's the Ukraine problem is unique because many of us for years have said Ukraine should become part of NATO if it wants to become part of NATO, but it isn't ready at this stage. NATO is a collective alliance of self-defense, but Ukraine is not currently in NATO. And Russia's one condition is it can never be a part of NATO, which we can't agree to. So it's a hard problem to resolve. I certainly agree that we cannot slide back into this world of spheres of influence. That's damaging. But are there conditions that we could enter into diplomacy that would put a pathway that would resolve this without fundamentally denying Ukraine the right to join NATO or without acceding to the spheres of influence? Is there a diplomacy that fits here?
I believe so. I believe so. That's why, and I'm very glad to see that Tony Blinken is in Europe, that he's pushing the way that Spain prefers dialogue. There is definitely room for that. First, we must say what is not acceptable. What is not acceptable is not to respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of any country. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to tell a country or an organization what the membership should be. But there are things we can do. It's fair to listen to the Russians. There might be things that we could do together. We can create measures that will build trust and confidence. We can talk about arms control. We can give explanations if they need further explanation to show that there is no aggressiveness at all in the way we perceive Europe. So yes, there is room for that, and I hope that on the other side, people with the same goodwill will be there to meet us.
You know, I've always admired Spain for its leadership within the EU. I think that you saw the EU as a great opportunity to help transform Spain. And it did that. It fundamentally helped Spain become a modern, constructive, very dynamic society. At the same time, you've been a great friend of NATO. You've had American ships still port in Rota, you know. It's something we're very important to us. We're very proud of this. You've bridged across these two, the EU and NATO. Now, in the past, the EU didn't really focus so much on defense, but now it is. I think the European Union is working on a strategic document, I think called the Strategic Compass. At the same time, you're going to host in Madrid the NATO summit this summer. How does Spain and how do you look at the relationship of the EU as a military element and NATO as a military alliance? How do you put those two together?
For us, it's totally compatible. Spain is one of the most, if not the most, pro-European country within the Union, within the European Union. We are very proud of belonging to Europe, and every time we can, we like to play European, because the scope of many problems, security threat, climate change, irregular migration, only have a solution with a European response. We are always very keen to push forward European defense, but that's not antinomic with NATO. On the contrary, a very solid and strong pillar of European security within NATO is the best guarantee to have a good future for the alliance. How we perceive that in Spain? The time has come for Europe to decide what are the threats for Europe, what we want, where we want our European voice to be heard clearly in the world, and then what capacities we need to do it. And it's fair that we do that among Europeans. Once we have that done, it's also fair and even necessary that the next step is let's have a high-level dialogue with our natural ally, the United States, that will tell us what are the perception of threats for me, for the United States, what are the capacities they have, and we'll decide both together what we must do on our own, together, how to do it, and how to be complementary. I think that that's the key to success, because at the end of the day, there is one thing that unites us all. We are a community of values, United States and Europe. We believe in multilateralism. We believe in democracy. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in a world based on stable rules. That's what really matters.
You know, I'm so glad to hear you say this. I remember my time in government, now it was 20 years ago, so a different century. But back then, honestly, every time Europe, the EU, tried to come together on defense issues, we would run in and steal the ball so you couldn't play the game. You know, we would basically try to block it because we thought it was a threat to NATO. I think we're growing out of that. We're not still out of that. I think we still have some long-standing, you know, muscle memory and arrogance that we're really in charge. But I think we have to think about what are the areas where Europe should take the lead on security now. Now, when it comes to something with Russia, which is a big military force, you know, we're going to have to be involved. But there have to be lots of security issues where Europe should take the lead on behalf of NATO. You know, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, NATO should start to think also towards the south. We talk, in the last few years, we talk a lot about what we call the 360-degree NATO, which is very, very accurate. But in order to do that, we must put content on it. NATO must look also to the south, the Sahel, the Gulf of Guinea, all sorts of illegal trafficking happening in that region. Jihadism still very present there. Regular and irregular troops of different countries appearing in the Sahel. So looking at that vacuum of security, at that vacuum of democracy in the region, an alliance as NATO based on stable rules, on democracy, must have also a say. And it's possible for NATO. NATO has already one partner, Mauritania. There are other countries that might want to engage, and that has nothing to do with military operation on the ground, of course, but there are training missions. There is a political dialogue with all those countries that need backing. You take the Sahel. 10 years ago, democracy was starting to appear in the region. Nowadays, you see military juntas everywhere. We have to reflect about all that. So those areas that are close to Europe, that is our neighborhood, we share with them that region. Europe has a better inside information, a better view, and could lead the efforts of NATO.
You know, historically, NATO, of course, was always focused in Germany, North German plains, looking east. NATO long ignored the Mediterranean. I mean, we had a command, but it was never at the front line of leadership within NATO. Now we're realizing how important it is, but we don't understand it. We need stronger voices within NATO with your perspective to help us understand. Is it best to do that within NATO, or would that be something that the EU partnership with NATO would be key? Because the EU doesn't necessarily have a strong Mediterranean focus either. I mean, so how would we best get that perspective of the Mediterranean challenges, threats sometimes? How would we get that better into a multilateral security framework?
EU has already a very strong dialogue with the other side of the Mediterranean. That's a common region. And what we want is a prosperous Mediterranean region, a stable Mediterranean region. And it's the same reflection that we should do with NATO. That doesn't mean to make a huge shift on what NATO does, but to integrate that into NATO's reflection. Definitely, my point of view, European Union should take the lead, and NATO could complement and join in specific points where those capacities are needed.
Mm-hmm. Could there be something like a responsibility sharing agreement, you know, where the EU has the lead in the Mediterranean? Something like would be helpful. Or?
Definitely, the next summit of NATO in Madrid, we will have to think about that concerning all regions in the world. There is a joint communication EU-NATO that is going to be issued very soon. And in Madrid, we have to have that dialogue between European Union and NATO on all the regions in the world. Precisely that. What European Union can do better. What European Union wants to do on its own, what United States doesn't want to do with European Union, and that's all fair, and we can have that dialogue. We are natural allies. We can do that. And then decide those things that we are going to do jointly, what is the best percentage of partnership between European Union and NATO. What we cannot do is walk alone, each one on its own side, NATO on one side, European Union on the other, as if we were two strangers or we had nothing to do. We must not forget that many members of European Union, we are also members of NATO. This year, in the summit of Madrid, we are going to commemorate also the 40th anniversary of the entrance of Spain in NATO. Very close to the entrance of Spain in European Union.
Yeah. Well, I think this is something we should be doing here. We should be thinking a bit more creatively about the opportunities that come with Spanish leadership within the EU to get a stronger Mediterranean focus and have Europe take the lead on it for us, because we just don't have the depth and background, and frankly we've got so many other things we're focused on. So it'd be good to, I hope you will help us guide, and I'd like to follow up, to see what opportunities. You've introduced the issues of security in the Maghreb. We now, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, we collectively went in and we overthrew Gaddafi, but then we kind of walked away. We lost our focus. You haven't. Italy hasn't, because you live with it all the time. Can you share with us your perception of the security environment in the Maghreb, and what should we be understanding and knowing about that here?
Yes, we are engaging, for instance, more and more in Libya. We've been attending the different international conference. I was very pleased to attend the first international conference in Tripoli of Ministers of Foreign Affairs since many years ago. So there is some hope there, but it's still very fragile, everything. We need to be together and all of us join forces to get a stable and prosperous Libya. What's very important, there is the appearance of foreign fighters in many countries and in many parts, Libya, but also in the Sahel. That's not a way of making a stable region, a prosperous region. The European Union must speak up very clearly, and we do it, and we do it. What we need is to spread democracy. Many countries in all the region are giving timetables for elections, and this is being postponed. We must be also very clear. That's the way to conflict. People must be able to express their view. Once we have all those governments that have been elected, then we can help them with development cooperation, very important. Without development cooperation, we will not have stability in the region. That's much needed. A common reflection on irregular migration. We must not forget that all the countries in the Maghreb are the first one that get the impact of irregular migration. Thousands of sub-Saharans that go to those countries before they try to reach to Europe. So we must have that high-level dialogue. And then to see common schemes of security, to make the Mediterranean not the sea that puts a divide and a difference between us, but the sea that brings us together.
Is there a consensus within the EU on the way forward for the Maghreb, for all of the security and development challenges? Do you have a strong consensus in the EU?
The problem, I wouldn't say it's consensus. We can get the consensus. For instance, in November, there was an EU, what we call in EU, Southern Neighborhood meeting, very good meeting in Barcelona. I was there. The High Representative Borrell was there. All European countries were there, and they push it forward. The only thing is we must make an effort, all Europeans, not to think that the Mediterranean is only the affair of the Mediterranean European countries, but that the challenges and the opportunities I don't want to give a gloomy vision of the region. The opportunities that there is there, that are huge, concern all Europeans, whether you are a Mediterranean European country or you are a Northern or an Eastern European country.
Yeah, this is an area where I think EU leadership would be very welcome, because we just don't understand it well enough. It does directly affect you. It does to us too, but really Europe is so affected, and it's not just, as you say, the southern tier countries. You know, you feel the burden more intensely, but that doesn't mean everybody doesn't have an equal responsibility for it. So I hope you're able to do that. Is the situation stable now in for example, Algeria, or is it still uncertain?
Algeria is a strategic partner for Spain, very focused also in energy, but a strategic partner as a whole. And with Algeria, we build a double common region, the Mediterranean, but very specifically the Western Mediterranean. What we want is to work with them, to make them prosperous and make them stable. Because at the end of the day, if they are prosperous and stable, the Mediterranean will be prosperous and stable, and everyone, Spain and the rest of Europe, will benefit of it. What we must find is a common agenda, both sides of the Mediterranean, the European part and the African part, in which we find mutual beneficial issues and concrete issues on which we can work.
And
a very young population, they need a response in the Maghreb,
yeah.
to find a job, to get education. We can help on that. That will give stability. To give just a very concrete and short-term example.
And we should include our good friends in Morocco that also, I think, have a parallel perspective just like that. I mean, there has to be some solution that's bringing prosperity in general. Continued frustration of the lack of dialogue between Algeria and Morocco, but we've got to find ways to try to help with that. Could I just shift here your worldview? It's such exciting opportunity to talk with you, but to the Western Hemisphere, Spain has much more of a moral authority in the Western Hemisphere than sometimes people realize. You are seen as being a leader intellectually for a lot of countries in South America. We continue to watch with great frustration the tragedy in Venezuela. I know that you've been active in thinking about this. Could you share your thoughts about how we should move forward in Venezuela?
Yes, before that, I want to stress the importance of Latin America for Spain. And that's a common point of our relationship with the United States. At the end of the day, I would say there are only two countries in the world that really care, that really love, and are really interested for Latin America: Spain and the United States. Whether it is good time, bad times, we will always be there, next to Latin America. We are seeing it in COVID-19. Spain is the second largest donor of vaccine doses to Latin America, and we are offering them to any country in Latin America, as many as they want. Of course, we have a community with them. We call it the Ibero-American community. A community means values, principles, objectives that are common. It's like a family. Those values include also democracy. That's why we do as much as we can to promote it. We are very pleased to see governments from anywhere on the political board, right, left, progressive, conservative, appearing. We don't want to tell Latin Americans which government they must choose. It's up to them. But we cannot accept when democracy is put aside. So whatever that happens, in Nicaragua very recently, I was very clear about it. It was a real mockery what happened. There are political prisoners. In Venezuela, we think that the political dialogue among Venezuelans must be once again on the table, must restart. The very recent regional and local elections are a moment of hope. There is this path. Might be narrow, might be difficult, but we must push forward. The Spanish government talks with everyone in Venezuela. The government of Maduro, the opposition, whether it's Leopoldo López or Capriles, because the solution must come from Venezuela, must be political, and must be peaceful, and must be democratic, that's for sure.
I've had a number of conversations with your wonderful ambassador here about needing a new transatlantic dialogue, but a transatlantic dialogue that involves Latin America. You know, now when you say transatlantic, you can hear it's always North America stuff, but it should be Latin America too. It should be South America. But you would have to be, you're the crucial linchpin for that, because we have a complicated, you know, inept imperial history with South America. We've come in a number of times and overthrown governments, and people remember that, and we don't necessarily have a very positive history that we can draw on, and there's a lot of, you know, ambivalence on the part of about South Americans about us. I think that it would be crucial to have you be our big brother to help with creating a new transatlantic dialogue that looks south. What are your thoughts about an opportunity here?
Absolutely agree with you. The transatlantic bond is also with Latin America. I always tell my European colleagues that I don't understand why Europe doesn't look more closely into Latin America, that is by far the most Euro-compatible region in the world. They share our values of multilateralism, our values of free trade. So nothing more natural that Europe looks into Latin America. That's why we are pushing forward very hard to the European Union-Mercosur agreement, the Chile-EU agreement, or the Mexico-EU agreement to be concluded. It will be mutual beneficial. Spain will always be there. And we are eager to include the United States, because at the end of the day, United States and Spain will always be there to try to help Latin America. Spain is taking the presidency of the European Council in 2023, next year, in the second semester. We are starting to make a reflection, to think about what will be the priorities. We are still too far to put specific priorities, but you can count that one thing that we will put on the table will be a strong dialogue between European Union and Latin America.
I have two questions from our virtual audience that are really our follow-on here. And one deals with the whole question of the challenges that democracy faces with Cuba and Venezuela and what they've been doing. Could you share with us Spain's thoughts about that and what can be done about that, how we could collectively do a better job on this challenge of anti-democratic countries in Americas?
Absolutely. There are two things when we deal with countries like that. For Spain, all countries in Latin America are equally important, because the relationship that we have with their people are equally important, whatever the size or the interest for private companies or their geographical situation. The limit to the dialogue with their governments, not with their people, is the shared values. The shared values of the Ibero-American community. Democracy is one of them. The complicated thing is that democracy needs to come from inside. We cannot impose it. But of course, we can speak up very clearly, and I've done it very clearly. I claim freedom of speech and freedom of demonstration in Cuba very recently during the month of July. I claim to the Spanish information agency EFE that they must get back their cards to be able to give objective information from Cuba. We have back the electoral mission of European Union in Venezuela. We are waiting the final report, but we follow the lines of the provisional report that said that there had been faults in those elections, even if things have improved. So we must speak up. We must be close to the elements that want more democracy in those countries. And we must work together with the countries in the region, knowing that at the end, all we can do is be there to be next to them helping them, but we cannot impose anything.
Well, I'm speaking just for myself, of course, but I think it also is fair. I think most Americans would welcome more Spain. We would like to see a more active and involved Spain in our hemisphere, because I think you can bring a richness that, because we do share democratic values. And you know, one of the other questions that I received here from the audience involves our migration problem. You have migration challenges from the Maghreb. We have migration challenges from Central America because of climate change, the loss of employment, criminal gangs, drug trafficking gangs. It isn't safe for people, and they've been moving north. And the answer isn't to build a wall or to, have a more gentle, humane, immigration system to turn people away. It is about jobs, it's about opportunity, it's about governance. What are your thoughts? Because I know you're wrestling with this in Europe. What are your thoughts for us here about Central America?
Well, definitely the wall is not the solution, and it will not be productive. There is always a way for irregular migration to enter a country. We are very worried about Central America because all the rest of the countries of Latin America get attention, either because private companies are there, because they appear in the medias. But Central America, small countries, no one really thinks that it's their issue. We think that that's a very good point in which United States and Spain can join forces to help develop Latin America. The Spanish government just appointed within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs an ambassador at large for Central America. We are pushing forward also for European Union to make Central America our region of a special focus in the world, as we do in the Sahel, to get funds to develop and to help Central America. And that's also a part of the dialogue that I'm having with Tony Blinken, what we can do together in Latin America to solve the root causes of all the different challenges.
Well, it's clearly we're going to need this, because we're dealing with symptoms of a malady, not the cause of it. And so I really would welcome any ideas and thoughts you have. If I could just go back to North Africa, one of the colleagues in our virtual audience asked about the Western Sahara. Now, when I first came to Washington in 1973 is when I remember the big, the Polisario and Western Sahara and all this. And this is, talk about a frozen conflict, a frozen conflict in the middle of a hot desert. But now this has been was resolved by the Trump administration in one sense, but it's not quite entirely resolved. Can you share your thoughts about Western Sahara?
Well, Spain, as the United States, we are part of the group of friends of Sahara within the United Nations. We are very pleased to see Stefan de Mistura, the recently appointed special envoy of Secretary General Guterres, doing a trip in the region. By the way, he's doing it in an aeroplane of the Spanish Air Forces, because we want to spend political capital in trying to unblock the situation, to get a solution. There are thousands of people, thousands, many of them very young, that have no hope because of all these decades with everything. We cannot continue. It's almost a decision of moral order. We must have, and we must try to push forward a solution. There is a special envoy of the Secretary General. There is a group of friends. Let's all work together to try to find a solution. The Security Council has many resolutions on the Sahara. There are different ideas on the table. Let's push forward. Let's try to find that political, mutually accepted decision that will bring both parties to the table and to the final solution. And that's where we are. We cannot talk on behalf of others, of course, but if we are part of the group of friends, we can talk to them.
I want I want to come at the very end to a direct conversation about U.S.-Spain, but before I get there, I'd like to ask one really global question. In Washington, everybody here is obsessed about the great challenge and threat posed by China. We're looking at it in a very, kind of a Cold War way. I wouldn't say that we've got a very well framed perspective on it yet, but we're coming together. But it's pretty negative here about China. Historically, Spain has played a role of trying to be an active broker, and see the opportunities for China. China's become more active commercially, in the region. But in last couple of years has been more of a challenge with China. How do you look at, and I'm asking you not only from being the foreign minister of Spain, but also being a leader in the EU, how do you look at China these days, the complexity of China and its involvement in Europe?
Complexity is probably the very right word for the relationship with China. This is a dialogue that we have within the European Union as well. And we are at the point in which we have to say, when is China a challenge for us and what we can do about it, and when China can be a partner for us. And that's all the complexity. What we cannot do is to avoid it. It's a big country. It's being assertive. And that's the decision. That's one of the decisions that Europeans, we must have among ourselves, and then have that dialogue also with the United States.
Finally, let me thank you. Let me finally take the last few minutes we have, and we're really coming to the end, just to ask your thoughts about the bilateral relationship. I think it's strong, but it isn't robust. There isn't enough of a dialogue between Spain and the United States. It's not for lack of effort by this talented embassy you have, but we're not focused like we should be. Is there a specific agenda that Spain and the United States should be undertaking, that could build a stronger tie between us?
We are very happy and very proud of the work of the embassy and our ambassador. That's for sure. They are part of the solution. They are part of making
Every day.
ties stronger. From the meetings I had yesterday, I'm still having today, our relationship is in really good health and is getting even stronger. I can only have kind words toward my friend Tony Blinken, the quality of the dialogue. In 6 months that I've been minister, I've been talking almost every month or meeting with him. I met in Paris in the margins of the OECD 3 months ago. United States and Tony Blinken were chairing that meeting. Nancy Pelosi, exactly the same, with the Latino leaders, everything. What we must try to see is how to adapt a historical relation that it's there and that has been traditionally very much based on security and defense, and that part must continue, especially nowadays, in these very days that we are living, and to adapt it to the 21st century, to a very technological era in which there are new actors, there is new threats. That's the kind of dialogue that I'm having also with the United States. And avail ourselves of the common areas. We want to do things together in Central America, working for the prosperity of Latin America. We are a very pro-European country, but Europe must have a high-level dialogue with a natural ally. We can be there as well. It's all that type of dialogue to upgrade our relation to the new world, a world that is more digital, that will be more sustainable and more green, with new actors and with new threats.
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to think about a new transatlantic dialogue, but South Atlantic. I think there's a real opportunity for us to work together on something, because we need it. I mean, we need it here, and frankly, we would need your partnership to be credible in South America. So I think it's a huge opportunity if we could explore it. This has been a fascinating hour with you. I now understand why you were lifted up to become the foreign minister. You've got all of the qualities it takes to guide through complicated matters and find positive solutions. Thank you for being with us today. We're very honored that you came to CSIS. We're honored that you came to the United States. It's very important to have a friend like you. I will leave any final words that you want to share with our audience before we end.
Thank you very much for hosting me here, and I'm very honored that you were yourself the one presenting me, and we were able to have this dialogue. It will not be my last time in the United States. The United States can rely on Spain, as has always been the case, as reliable and strong allies. It's in moments like this in which we see who are the real friends and who stand next to you. And we will continue increasing our agenda, fostering our agenda, and updating it. And I'm sure that the NATO summit in Madrid, 29th and 30th of June, is going to be a very important moment for NATO, but also for the bilateral relation between Spain and the United States.
I had not appreciated that it was an anniversary for your joining NATO. This is a marvelous coincidence of history. It's splendid. Congratulations. Thank you, Foreign Minister. It's an honor to have you here today. And thank you, audience. We're delighted you were all with us today. Thank you.